Okay, cool. Thank you for getting here promptly at 10 a.m. the morning after the big parties at AWE. I know it wasn't easy, so thank you. Today, I will be talking about engineering empathy, and mainly in the form of, I think, the evolution of computers. I think that we're in a really exciting state as humans with the emergence of AI, with the presence of really kind of advanced but quickly changing augmented reality and spatial technologies. But I come from a background, or rather, I've been working in the space of neurotechnology for the past 15 years. And so what we've been working on at OpenBCI for the last 6 years about is the convergence of neurotechnology, artificial intelligence, and spatial computing. So how do you take those three technologies and converge, and what is that? I believe that that convergence will define the next major paradigm shift in computers. All right, so this is the question I'm going to pose to the audience, and it's the question that I think about all the time, which is how do we build truly empathetic computers? And I think that we've used the term personal computer for a really long time, but I don't think we've ever truly had a personal computer. The truth is that personal computers to date have always been designed for the masses, so I think it's a bit of a misnomer to call anything that we've previously designed as a personal computer. But I do think with the emergence of artificial intelligence and the introduction of neurotechnologies or brain-computer interfaces that we will eventually, and hopefully sooner rather than later, build a truly empathetic computer, a personal computer that actually understands you as an individual, as a unique human inside of the operating system. So let's check out what we got. All right, this is like the current state of computers. They look kind of like this, squiggly lines, the whole situation. Monitor, keyboard, mouse. When you think of like the original personal computer, this is what you think of in terms of the outputs from the computer, a display, maybe with some audio, and the inputs into the computer, mouse and keyboard. And so, in the last 20 so years, this has really kind of taken over the personal computing landscape. The little computers that we carry around in our pockets are now probably our most ubiquitous personal computing technologies. So what defines, or what makes up, or what are the primary kind of components of a personal computer? So computers are made of inputs. You need things like a mouse and a keyboard, but you also need processing and memory. You need this kind of like this nucleus of the computer to be taking your inputs and calculating and crunching some numbers to generate outputs, right? And this is this relationship back and forth between the human and the computer. And so, this is a really, I'd like to highlight this relationship, is that the computer itself is a tool for humans, right? I do not believe that modern computers are very empathetic. If anything, they're the opposite of empathetic. It's almost like this has kind of turned into an abusive relationship where, there's very little empathy here. In fact, it's mostly attention thievery in a sense. It depends on what apps you're using and what tools you're using, but I do believe that the modern computer is kind of trending in the wrong direction, away from a state of empathy. So this right here is a bit of it's kind of like a more granular representation of the diagram that I just showed. The things that we traditionally think of, if we go back a few slides, right? The mouse and keyboard and the monitor, you can kind of think of as this middle lane here. Conscious inputs, things that you're clicking, you're very intentionally clicking, and then conscious feedback, right? Things that you can see, things that you can hear, they actually register in your primary cortex as stimuli. Where I believe computers are trending is kind of towards this outer loop, which is the subconscious input and the subconscious feedback. And this is what we've been working on at OpenBCI to try to build metrics for intention, emotion, to have a computer that can actually understand the basic facets of consciousness or cognition. And so when I look at this loop, all I see is neuro plus AI plus spatial. I see the neuro, the kind of passive subconscious inputs coming from the human heart rate, brain activity, sweat on the skin, these things that that are kind of passive and subliminal, they can be registered by a computer now in very high fidelity and in real time. But also, we now have the ability with advanced virtual reality and augmented reality to provide much richer representations of the real world, but also just to provide way higher fidelity audio and visual feedback to the human inside of the computer system. And I believe now that we're really just at the kind of tip of the iceberg. Like we're just now starting to integrate these technologies together into something that I do believe will become the next true computer. So how did I get into this? I got into this because I got really interested in the brain. I got a bunch of concussions playing rugby with this guy over here. This is Joe. He's our interim CEO and president. You're CEO and president at the moment, actually. So I'm on a sabbatical right now. This is me taking a sabbatical from my sabbatical. But way back in the day, Joe and I played rugby together, bumped my head a bunch of times, got super interested in concussions and the difference between the mind and the brain. And then I went to art school because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. Obviously, art is the answer. And then in art school, I ended up finding brain-computer interfacing, which is kind of ironic. But it was in this kind of vocational program, design and technology at Parsons, that I started tinkering with baseball caps and EEG sensors. And in the beginning, I was building like procedurally generated art and little mini games that were influenced by EEG. But then I realized that there was a huge opportunity to create an open source EEG platform to try to get the maker community, people who were working with Arduinos and Raspberry Pis, to have access to an entirely new platform for interfacing the brain and body. So this was one of the first brain waves I ever recorded. So this is my brain activity right here. And we found a nice little audio track to lay over top. But this, like that, when I saw my brainwave for the first time and I saw the waves, true waves emerging from my head, I got really inspired, and I kind of just have never stopped working with brain-computer interfaces. This was back in fall of 2011. So yeah, we're almost 15 years into the journey. But in the beginning, this is what I set out to do. I was like, hey, I really want to make it so it's a lot easier for artists, researchers, game designers, people into robotics, people from a wide range of backgrounds and disciplines to have access to brain activity. And I thought it was all the brain. I was like, you could do everything with brain data. Brain data is the holy grail. We can unlock everything that we need by tapping directly into the brain. And so that turned into OpenBCI. So OpenBCI is the company that I founded. It's my one and only baby at the moment. I love this company. And over the last 15 years, 13 years, we've produced, I don't know how many tens of thousands of products that we've shipped all over the world. We've really kind of, I would say, fostered more than a decade of low-cost, open-source research and development in brain and body computer interfacing. So this here is one of our flagship products that we call the Ultra Cortex, which means final cortex. Neocortex is the outer layer of the brain. The ultra cortex is the layer beyond that, hopefully the ultimate one. I'm going to come back to this loop because what I learned, if you go back to this slide, this was one direction. You can see the arrows flowing in one direction. And what we learned early on is that to build a real brain-computer interface, you can't just look at the data flowing in one direction. You actually need to look at the data flowing in both directions. You need to be able to see this kind of closed-loop system between man and machine. And so, about 6 years into my journey, I realized that we were only looking at half the picture. And that to understand a true BCI, you need that closed loop, because then you can build constructive or destructive interference patterns, or feedback loops, essentially control system between the computer and the mind of the human inside of the computer, right? And so this was one of the big realizations, is that you can't have a real empathetic computer or closed loop BCI, or rather neurotechnology system, unless it's looking at the in and the out. We also realized that brain data kind of sucks. It's just not good to only use EEG or brain data to try to understand what we really care about, which is actually the mind. And some people take offense to using the word mind. I think it's the shortest way to represent this concept that is very different from the brain. Like the brain is this hardware. It's the computer inside of our heads. It's the nucleus of our nervous system, but it actually is not what we ultimately care about. What we really care about is the operating system that exists inside of that organ, or honestly, it's represented by the entire body. There's a lot of information that you can understand about the human mind that doesn't come directly from the brain. In fact, the heart, the skin, your eyes, there's all of this, the rest of this data around your body is really, really valuable in understanding what we really care about, which is the human mind, not the brain. I'm not saying the brain is not important, but it shouldn't be the only thing that we look at. So the two takeaways there are that to build a real empathetic computer, it needs to be bidirectional, right? You need to have a system that's both listening and providing information back. And the tighter that you can kind of control that loop, the better. And then the second thing is that we can't just use conscious inputs like a mouse and a keyboard to build an empathetic computer. And brain data on that kind of subconscious loop is not enough. We really need the rest of the physiological data from the body. And so, okay, so this is like a cool pump-up video. This is, over the last decade, we've created so many concepts, so many headsets, so many designs of how do we interface the human body? How do we understand ultimately what someone is thinking about, what somebody cares about? Can we build metrics for human emotions? And all of that has kind of trended towards our latest flagship product, Galia. So this is Galia, and I'll let the slides speak for themselves for a second. We build all of these in Brooklyn. We do all the final assembly of the Galia headsets in our little Brooklyn R&D factory. And so to date, we've built a couple hundred Galias, and we've shipped most of them. And we're now kind of sitting on the final fleet for our own internal research. But at the current state of the art, the Galia headsets today cost $50,000 to $60,000 per device. And it's just because they took 6 years of R&D. They're extremely complex systems. Like each headset has something like, I think, 24 PCBs inside of the headset, right? And so the designing and producing this almost killed me, I think. I think I lost my mind, or I touched like the event horizon of insanity, and then was like, yeah, I'll wait a little longer. But no, really, it was such an incredible feat. Blake and Joe here in the audience, we really kind of flew close to the sun, and we took some money from investors, but we got across the valley of death, and we built these devices. And now, in the last 2 years, we've done some really, really cool things with our own technology, including giving a TED Talk, which I'll show a little bit about here. We did a project with the US Air Force where we built a full closed loop system, and we used a form of electrical stimulation of the nervous system to demonstrate that we could nudge mental metrics. So we decoded mental metrics across a population, we turned them generic, and then we built a system that essentially automatically stimulated people inside of a kind of a decision tree to nudge them towards desired mental states or away from undesired mental states. And then we also did a really cool F1 gaming demo with Lenovo, where we put people inside of like a high-res VR F1 simulator, and then we exposed their inner world to everybody at the GTC conference, which got us a lot of attention from even Jensen. So we had, I'll show you some fun photos. So this is Galia in its current state. Actually, it's advanced from here. These are early prints, so you can kind of see some of the kind of granularity of the texture. It's nice and smooth now. So we've come a long way from the original printed circuit boards, and now we're kind of we've got this full-blown hardware software system that I believe is like all of the modern building blocks of neurosensing and AR, VR integrated into a system where we're now deploying our own AI, and we're training models, and we're using our technology to try to understand human consciousness in a way that we haven't understood it before. So these are some early sketches and renders. This is Galia Alpha. This was the first device. We worked with Valve for a couple years during COVID, where we built Valve. They got the first fleet of Gallia devices, and big fan of Valve, the company. I'm a gamer. I love video games. Joe and I got to meet Gabe Newell in a little fishbowl conference room, and we got to pitch him on why Gallia. And so actually, if it wasn't for Valve, none of this would have been possible. So thank you, Valve. You guys rock. But then, where are we now? So then, shortly after that, I got the opportunity to work with Christian Byerlane. So he's a friend of mine who suffers from spinal muscular atrophy. So he has cerebral palsy, spinal muscular atrophy, and he has a little bit of motor function below the neck, but he's essentially fully quadriplegic. And so what we did the first time we met was we hooked him up to OpenBCI's sensors, and we built like 4 push buttons for him. And then after that, he was like, man, I've never been able to fly a drone. Can you guys help me fly a drone? And we were like, I think we can do this. So then when was this? This was 2023, early spring. This was right when Blake joined the company. I was like, Blake, you want to go to Germany and like work in an open air hackerspace in the middle of winter to try and help Christian fly a drone? So we did that. We flew out there, and it was like we were working like 33 degrees Fahrenheit. That's why we're wearing beanies and stuff. But I think that this was one of the most meaningful, if not the most meaningful project I've ever gotten to work on, where we actually succeeded in building Christian a unique interface where we essentially adapted these push buttons into a virtual joystick, and then he used this joystick on the TED stage. Can I fast forward through this a little bit? Let's see if he used this joystick on the TED stage to fly a drone. And I just want this to get to the end because it's so inspiring. And he closed the talk. If you haven't seen this talk, you should watch it. It's really, really powerful. You could skip the part where I'm talking and just go straight to the end where he does the demo. Because the last minute he closes the talk, and I left the stage. I knew what was coming, and I was bawling my eyes out when I left the stage. I was like, this is technology at its best. So we built him like a straight up Iron Man HUD where he was, I don't know, like you saw that, right? So he was looking through his own Iron Man HUD with a UI visualizer to fly the drone over like 2 rows of billionaires. So like the insurance never would have covered a crash for sure. So luckily he didn't crash, but it was real. We didn't fake it. So this one, I'm gonna skip through a lot of this, but this is the GTC demo. This was our pump up with Lenovo. We did this race car demo where we were decoding metrics for stress in real time, and then we exposed the inner world of people at GTC. And so this was our booth at GTC. This was Jensen when he was like, oh man, that's cool. And then he was like, mind blown. So we got him to sign that headset. So we had to take a $50K device out of inventory and just put it on a shelf because he marked it up. And then the latest thing, I'm gonna, for time's sake, I wanna leave a little time for Q&A, but this is the latest project that we did with the Air Force where we essentially adapted that GTC demo that we did, and we made a much more comprehensive tool for decoding stress, attention, and nausea in a flight simulation and training environment. And this is where you hear Zoe, our research scientist, talking about the system. So this is how the closed loop system works, right? We have the flight training, the Gallia headset that's doing all of the sampling of the data. And then we have cognitive state detection, which is essentially an AI decoder that we built. And then this software is doing the kind of intelligent stimulating based on metrics that we're decoding in real time. So I think that this is like the holy grail of this industry, which is like we've proved that we can decode in a kind of generic way mental metrics for stress, attention, and nausea, but like come up with any concept you want, any construct for emotion or state of mind. If you build the right task to induce that state of mind in the user, you can then decode it using multimodal neurotechnology. At which point, if you decoded it, now you can just kind of like stress test the system on the person to see if you can nudge that metric in real time. So that's effectively what we've done here. So this is what we're working on now, which is the future of Gallia. This is a concept render and a concept video at present, but we've got a number of patents that are kind of provisional patents. This is what we want to build. We want to take Gallia, the $50,000, $60,000 device right now, and compress it down to something that is consumer price, consumer size. And so Gallia Unlimited is the concept of where we're going in the future. Where are we? Yeah, Gallia Unlimited, cool, intense colors. This is one of the early sketches that led to that render. This is like a kind of a composite with this neck computer concept that we're working on, where we're gonna put a lot of the heavy, hot things away from the head to try to make the headset as light as possible. And then how are we doing on time? Also, cool exploding video, great. And then, yes, so how do we build truly empathetic computers? I think I've kind of touched on a lot of this, but we now know this diagram. I use this diagram all the time. I've used it for the last 6 or 7 years in most of my talks, some version of this diagram. But I think to actually have truly empathetic computers, you actually have to trust. To have real empathy with someone, there has to be an element of trust. And I think that this is a component that is really lacking from modern computers, is that these devices here are like one way, right? Your mind goes in, but you get very little information back. And I don't really trust my phone to keep, or my computer to keep my thoughts private to me. And so, at OpenBCI and with Gallia, this is one thing that's really kind of critical to our innovation, is how do we make sure that this meta profile that's being built about you, all of your data, the representation of your inner world actually stays in your possession, and then you get to kind of control where it ends up, who has access to it. And so we've coined this term, the mental vault, which is this concept that all the data that you generate as a user of one of these consumer devices would be, it would belong to you until you decide otherwise. And I think that, this is something that as inventors of the next generation of computers, we all need to think about, because this is what I think is really lacking most in modern computation. So, Gallia Unlimited, thank you guys. That's all I got for today. I appreciate you sticking around and showing up on time, so thank you very much. We've got 2 minutes for questions, so maybe 1 or 2 questions if anybody has one.
Okay, guys, for recording purposes, if you have a question, please come to the Q&A mic and ask your question. Thank you.
Nate, nice. All right. Oh, she beat you. No, you got there first.
I was just wondering if you do anything around breath.
Breath?
Yeah.
At the moment, we, in our study most recently, we did not look at breath, but I think that breath is super important. Respiration, the rate of breathing, and a lot of that there's sensors where you can do almost they're stretch sensors where you can look at the expansion and contraction of the chest cavity, but you can also do a lot of that with an IMU, an inertial measurement unit. So with high fidelity IMUs, you can detect breathing. You can decode it. So I think it's really, really important and definitely part of this multimodal landscape that I clump all of that under neurotechnology. I think that really depends on the use case that you're going for, but breath, heart rate variability, pupil dilation, sweat on the skin, EEG, brain activity, all of that should be looked at together to build the metrics. And for what it's worth, when we were building our decoders, EEG played a part, but it was one of the lower factors in the successful decoding of some of those mental states. So not surprisingly, pupil dilation, sweat on the skin, and heart rate actually had a larger influence in our decoding of states of mind. So
yeah, you should look into the detection of the breath, the sound of the breath. We're doing that. We should talk after.
Okay, let's talk after. Sounds good. All right, 22 seconds, go.
Okay, 22 seconds. Effective computing.
Yeah.
How do you see effective computing and that foundation that's been pushed for 30 years or so different? Or how is empathetic computing targeted or broader than that? idea?
So effective AF, affective, right? So I would say that like I'm not an expert on this, so I don't know, I'm not a researcher, I'm kind of an engineer, designer, technologist, so we should chat afterwards, and people who are interested in this should listen to us have a conversation. But I think there's probably a lot of overlap in the affective computing and the kind of empathetic computing that I've alluded to here, right? So yeah. Yep. Thank you guys, appreciate it. Thank you guys for sticking around, so awesome.